Today, Matt Walsh Show, 40 million people might lose their food stamps, which brings up an important question. How the hell are there 40 million people on food stamps in this country? And what would happen if the food stamps go away? Would anyone actually starve to death because of that? We'll discuss. Also, Zohran Smollett changes his story about his alleged aunt who stopped wearing her hijab on the subway. Do you remember the story of Ethan Liming? He was the white teenager who was beaten to death in a school parking lot 2 years ago. One of his attackers is already out of jail and is already killed again. We'll talk about all that and more today on The Matt Walsh Show. Ever heard of the audience effect? It's when people act differently because they know they're being watched. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Your ISP is watching everything you do online, every site you visit, every search you make, even in private browsing mode. That constant surveillance changes how you behave online, whether you realize it or not. If you want your freedom back, you got to get ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, 100% of my online activity is rerouted through secure, encrypted servers, making it impossible for my ISP to track anything that's happening. It also hides my IP address, the number that identifies you on the internet, which data brokers use to build profiles that they then sell to marketers and other companies. And given that a major data broker was just hacked, exposing the names and social security numbers of 2.9 billion people, I'm not willing to hand over any information that could be leaked. You know, as someone who spends hours researching for each show, I rely on ExpressVPN constantly, whether I'm digging into topics for the show, browsing, whether I'm traveling, anything it is. I can't imagine doing research without that protection, especially when I have to connect to airport or public Wi-Fi on the go, which I very often do. The best part, ExpressVPN is incredibly easy to use with just one click. Works across all your devices, phones, tablets, smartphones, desktops, and lets you protect up to 14 devices at once, so your whole family can enjoy real internet freedom and privacy. Right now, you can get an extra 4 months when you use my special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Walsh. Get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Walsh. Ever since the government shutdown began a month ago, it's been a challenge to identify anybody in real life outside of government employees who has noticed or cared in any meaningful way. Even Democrats don't seem particularly bothered by the shutdown. They've been spending most of their time lately complaining about renovations that are underway in the East Wing of the White House, which is the kind of thing you complain about when you desperately need to find something to complain about, but you have no other options whatsoever available to you. Now, even if you normally don't care much about how the government spends your money, this is the kind of development that might make you sit up and take notice. There are road closures and potholes that have probably caused you more inconvenience, a lot more this month than the shutdown of the entire federal government. And as a result, for millions of Americans, it's now impossible to ignore the fact that the government, which you're forced to pay for, all the salaries, all the pensions, and so on, doesn't actually do very much. In the vast majority of cases, the federal government has zero impact on your day-to-day life or your week-to-week life. They are not public servants in the sense that they serve you. In reality, you serve them. You pay them to do nothing. Of course, that's not to say that your money only goes to federal government bureaucrats. Most of it, of course, actually goes to welfare programs. And it's the people who receive money from those welfare programs, particularly food stamps, otherwise known as SNAP benefits, who are now speaking up extremely loudly to complain about the federal government shutdown. So there is one group of people that, aside from federal bureaucrats, who care that the government shut down, and that would be EBT, people who use EBT. Yes, this is a large group of people who are legitimately upset about the fact that the government is no longer fully operational. So the search is over. We have found people who care about it. And these people are upset because in a matter of days, federal funding for food stamps is going to run out. Watch.
Trump administration says it will not use emergency funds to pay for federal food benefits with a fast approaching deadline. CBS's Christina Fan is in New York with details on that. Christina.
Well, Jericho, 1 in 8 Americans rely on SNAP benefits, and tonight there is mounting worry for them. They might not be able to afford food with money running out 1 week from today.
Democratic Governor Maura Healey holds President Trump responsible.
You know, leadership is a choice.
And sadly, President Trump has chosen to take away food from people all around this country.
Now, you notice the flagrant inversion of reality here. If you stop subsidizing someone else's grocery bill, even for a second, then according to the governor of Massachusetts, you're taking away their food. It's like you robbed them. Now, of course, the actual robbery occurs when you are forced against your will to pay for other people's groceries every month. That is the point where the government is taking something away. But the really striking aspect of that CBS report was the beginning of the segment when they casually mentioned that 1 in 8 Americans are on food stamps. That's roughly 45 million people who are receiving taxpayer money to buy groceries costing more than $100 billion a year in a country of 340 million people. Now, in a moment, we'll get into who exactly is receiving this money and what they're threatening to do in the next few days. And that's important information, particularly if you plan on going to a grocery store in the next, few weeks without a firearm. But first, you have to ask yourself, did you have any idea that 45 million people of the 340 million people in this country, again, 1 in 8, were receiving taxpayer-funded financial assistance to buy groceries? Did you know that? If you pay really close attention to the news, you probably did. But the average person, you probably didn't know that. 45 million people are not buying their own groceries in this country. We're supposed to believe that 45 million people cannot feed themselves in this country. That's that's more than the entire population of California. That's more than the entire population of Texas plus Kentucky and Oklahoma, okay? Entire states full of people. It's that equivalent who can't feed themselves. Now, the sheer scale, allegedly can't feed themselves. Now, the sheer scale of this program guarantees that if we eliminated the food stamp program entirely, then prices at the grocery store would plummet. This is a point that I rarely hear anybody make, almost never. But it's really important. This is by far the number one everyday issue that most Americans care about, which is the rising price of groceries, and for good reason. And it actually has a very obvious solution. When the government spends a massive amount of money subsidizing the purchase of a particular product in any context, the price of that product will go up. It was true for college tuition, and it's true for groceries. The subsidy creates increased demand, but it does not increase the supply, and therefore the cost goes up under the basic principle of supply and demand. And yes, by the way, it is more demand, because you might say, well, there'd be demand for food anyway. It's greater demand, because now you have people who are not spending, it's not their money. They're going in there with other people's money, and they're spending like it. In fact, the average food stamp recipient spends more on groceries than the average person who's not on food stamps, because it's not their money. So they go in there and buy way more than they need. And they buy all types of food that they don't need at all and shouldn't be buying. It inflates the cost for everyone. Take a look at this data from the Department of Agriculture. You can see their monthly food stamp spending was just $4.5 billion in December of 2019. By December 2022, thanks to a massive expansion by the Biden administration, food stamp spending was $11 billion per month. That's a lot of new artificially subsidized demand. And guess what? In that same period, grocery prices went up. By some estimates, food prices go up by 1% for every 12% increase in food stamp spending. In this case, we're looking at a percentage increase of nearly 150%. So you could do the math on that. It's more than a 10% increase in your grocery bill every single month. And what this means is that if you're a working American and you're not on food stamps, meaning you are a functional citizen who is taking care of yourself and your own family, you are a functional, contributing citizen. What that means is you are actually paying, against your will, for other people's groceries twice. You're paying when the government takes the money out of your paycheck, and then you're paying again every time you buy groceries for yourself. So who exactly is benefiting from food stamps, and how much of the spending is actually necessary? So put another way, how many people would starve to death out on the street if food stamps were abolished. We all know that number is much, much less than the total number of food stamp recipients in this country. Does anyone think that 45 million people would starve if they didn't have an EBT card? Tens of millions of people across the country just dropping dead from starvation. Does anyone think that? So what is the number of people who actually need it, like would starve without it? 1%? 0? 5%? I mean, what's the number? 10? Now, if food stamps were abolished tomorrow, how many people exactly would be like lying on the sidewalk, rib cages protruding, starving to death? Of the 40 million people on food stamps, how many actually depend on it to live? Like that is the question. And these are questions we should probably answer now that we know the enormous cost of these programs, thanks to the government shutdown. And while we're at it, we should answer this question. Has anyone ever starved to death in the modern history of this country because they haven't had access to food? I mean, has that actually happened in this country? Has a single sane adult, okay, now we're not talking about kids who are victims of horrific abuse and those kinds of awful cases, in which case, like, food stamps are not solving that. Has any sane adult, through no fault of his own, shriveled and died because he couldn't afford to buy anything to eat? Has there been a single example of someone in modern America, someone who has no family, no friends, no other forms of state or federal welfare he can tap into, no food banks, no churches he can visit, no job, no soup kitchens nearby, no charity food drives in his area, nothing at all? So the point is that there are a bunch of lines of defense. Like when we deal with the question of, well, who should be feeding you, right? There are a lot of answers that come up. And the first person, ideally, who feeds you should be you. You should be feeding yourself if you're an adult. Who should feed your children? It should be you. Like that's the first. That's where we should go. It should be number one. You. And if you really can't, I mean, there are things that happen where someone really, really can't. So through no fault of their own, they're not able to feed themselves. That can happen. I'm not denying that. But then there are so many other, in modern America, there are so many other lines of defense. Even if you take EBT out of it, there are so many other lines of defense that should mean that you're not going to starve. You should have your family. You should have friends. Even if you don't have them, you have a local community. You have soup kitchens. You have charities. You have churches. You have all of these things. You have food drives. You have all of these things. You have other forms of welfare programs that also exist. So for how many people, I guess this is the question. How many people are in a situation where all of those lines of defense have failed? Every single one. And the only possible thing left that can feed them is EBT. You know, now, if something like that, if there were someone in that situation, if something like that were to ever happen in the United States, then I'd be the first in line to say, yes, get that person a taxpayer-funded hot dog. I don't want to see anyone starve. Nobody does. But I don't think that's actually happening in modern America. And nobody has demonstrated otherwise. Like, no one has presented us with a person and said, okay, here's an actual human who's alive today in America. And for this person, legitimately, if they don't have food stamps, they will starve. It's the only thing. It's the only way they could get their hands on food. No one has shown that example. And in fact, if you look at what food stamp recipients are saying in their own words, you come away with the distinct impression that almost none of these people actually need the food stamps. Instead, you come away with the impression that many of these people are simply entitled, lazy, barely literate, and like some of them are just frankly bad people. And of course, that doesn't describe every adult on food stamps. No one is saying that. But it does seem to describe a large portion of them. And that is a moral outrage that we as taxpaying Americans who are funding this, we have every right to be upset about that. When people are stealing our money who don't even need it and just wasting it in this profligate way. Don't let anyone morally blackmail you into thinking that you're not allowed to be upset about that. Of course you can be upset about that. And of course you can demand answers. You're taking my money. I want to know who exactly needs it and for what and how are you spending it? That is a legitimate question. Of course it is. And what you end up with is a lot of people who, rather than get a job, would prefer to rob grocery stores and the people shopping inside them. So here's just on that point, here's a sampling of the responses from food stamp recipients on TikTok to, all this stuff about the shutdown and losing the benefits. Watch.
All I know is if they stop my food stamps, me and my man will be at the grocery store walking out with two big ass carts. And nobody better do nothing because my man coming hard behind me and it only take him one time to punch your ass.
You know what? Since they want to take food stamps away, I'm going to Walmart. I'm going to rack up any damn Walmart, throwing it right in the basket. I'm coming right about the move, get the way. I'm not paying for a damn thing. Y'all got me up. I ain't getting a food stamp on EBT. Oh, watch this.
I'm gonna tell y'all straight up like this. I just got that text that the link is definitely cut the off for November. Y'all better stay the out of my way in these stores. I'm walking out with carts and I'm not paying for Trump, if you won't start looting, it's gonna happen. Before my kids go broke at this jock, I'm gonna be stealing like it ain't no tomorrow.
I say if they don't give food stamps next month, we all just say and rob the grocery store and tell them make me a grill.
I just wanted to come real fast just to make this video, just to make something very, very clear to the white man. Black Americans do not care about your government shutdown, and Black Americans do not care about you taking away our EBT and our government assistance, because Black Americans never depended on the American government to take care of us and feed us, because we never could. We were never able to depend on the government, in spite of what you may say and what you may try to force us to believe. So you can sit back and you can mock, you can laugh, and you can think that you're about to starve us to death. But I'm here to let you know that we are going to eat regardless, even if we have to hunt you animals down and roast and eat you. The delectable crackers and cheese. We will make it happen if we have to. Trust and believe me.
People are really going to be stealing people carts of groceries out of the grocery parking lot. I'm telling you. It seems like it's headed that way. Now, what other choices are people going to have to find food to eat? Because people about to be out here struggling. They about to be out here bad. So do you really think they're going to look at you with all these groceries, packing it in your car, about to go home and feed your family from the, hard-earned money that you made from working your job that afforded you the affordability to buy those groceries? They ain't going to give a They ain't going to care. They going to snatch them bags up out your hand and be like, I wish you would.
Now, among other things, if you're going to shop for groceries during this government shutdown, you have to keep these videos in mind. There are many, many threats like it. Many people receiving food stamps who would rather rob you and even kill you and eat you, apparently, than have to pay for their own groceries for once in their lives. They would rather rob and kill than just get a damn job. And I'll highlight a couple more of these clips, mainly because they're so over the top that it's hard to believe they're real, but they are. Watch.
Let my come on the 15th and I'm going to show them why I went to jail twice. I don't give a fuck. I'm not in the mood. My birthday is in December. Thanksgiving coming up. I don't see that what I'm saying, because my mama already had used my 150 this month. That's why I should never.
Now, as best I could decipher, this individual who doesn't appear to speak English is threatening to go to prison for the third time if her, or maybe his, I can't tell, food stamps don't come through in November. And for good measure, you can hear a smoke alarm chirp mid-rant. So in case you missed it, it went like this. I don't give a fug. I'm not in the mood. My birthday in December. And then there's the chirp, and then there's the statement that, quote, Thanksgiving coming up. Thanksgiving is a Thanksgiving is it's my favorite holiday, I gotta say. The Thanksgivings. So you are actively suffering. Money is being taken out of your paycheck, and food is being taken off of your children's plate for the sake of that. Remember that. For the sake of that person. Your life is being actively harmed every day. You are being forced to make real sacrifices in your life every day, and your family's being forced to, and your children, for that. Now, one question right off the bat is why someone who's been to prison is allowed to receive food stamps in the first place. I mean, why is this something we're tolerating? You could commit multiple crimes resulting in your incarceration, and then when you get out, you can force taxpayers to buy your groceries? You can not only be a total nothing of a person who contributes absolutely nothing to society, but you can actually actively work to harm society every day of your life. And yet still, we're forced to feed you. And yet still, you are going to eat better than many of the people who are being forced to subsidize your grocery bill. That seems like one privilege that we could rescind immediately. There's like basic things we could do. And while we're at it, we should implement drug testing as a requirement for SNAP benefits, as this video makes clear. Watch.
No food stamps equals no to less weed money. Like, y'all about to have people out here hangry and sober. That's a diabolical combination. Because the food money got to come out of some budget, and that's the first one it usually comes from.
Can you imagine the horror of having to tap into your weed budget to buy food for yourself? I mean, it's unthinkable, really. No one should have to endure humiliation like that. Surely we should just steal the money from people who are actually working for a living. Yeah, you can look at the saddest of sob stories and it doesn't get any better. Here's a report that aired on a local Fox affiliate this week, for example. Watch.
Federal workers waiting in long lines at this food bank in southern Maryland.
I would have never thought in a million years that I would have been in this position to have to go to a food bank.
Denise Blake says she drove over an hour to get here. When she finally arrived, they had run out of food.
We have a cart ready for you out front.
Fortunately, she did not leave empty-handed, but she still faces the harsh reality of not knowing how she's going to feed her family while she's not getting paid during the government shutdown.
I don't want my daughter to see me crying.
Blake's story is like so many.
So we're supposed to feel sorry for Denise, a federal worker at the Department of Defense. She had to go to a food bank and barely got any food, all because of the government shutdown. Now, if you look up Denise online, you find that she's drawn a taxpayer-funded salary since 2015. Her lowest salary was more than $60,000 a year. Last year, Denise made more than $87,000 a year. That's a decade's worth of income, and each year she earned well above the median personal income in this country. She presumably has access to a credit card, given this income. And to put this to put further perspective here, when I first got married, my salary was a quarter of Denise's, of what Denise earns. I earned in a year what Denise makes in about 4 months. And I was never even close to starving, and I wasn't on food stamps. So there's no conceivable way that Denise is going to starve to death either. I mean, even if she's been financially reckless to the point of comic book level absurdity, you know, we don't need food stamps. She can put it on credit or tap into her savings account, which she should have been growing for many years. You know, you got a stable government job, and you know, in these government jobs, by the way, the hours are not difficult at all. And to be clear, I'm not saying that she's going to live a life of luxury. I'm not saying this won't be stressful. Not even faulting her for trying to find free food. But I'm saying that taxpayers have no obligation in any universe to buy her groceries. We've been paying her bills for a decade, and frankly, if we're being honest, she probably wasn't doing much with those 10 years anyway at her job, because most of these federal employees aren't. But Denise, for all that I've criticized her, is 10,000 times more sympathetic than other alleged victims of this government shutdown. For example, This is a real video that was posted by Senator Amy Klobuchar after a recent testimony in Congress. And here's the caption that the senator posted. Quote, "Today we heard from Felicia, a single mom of 4 who works up to 3 jobs at a time to make ends meet. She counts on SNAP to help put food on the table. This is who Republicans in Congress are trying to take food away from. Listen to her story." So here it is. This is Felicia, who drives students, drives students for the school district. And this is the person who they have chosen to put on camera as an example of someone who, might starve without food stamps. So watch this.
As an employee of the school district, I only get paid once a month. By the time I get my bills paid, I have nothing left to pay for food and other basic needs. If it wasn't for SNAP benefits, I wouldn't be able to feed my children or myself. I work, pay my bills, and like every other mom, I want to be sure that I have enough food to put on the table.
So it almost seems like intentional. It almost seems like a poke in the eye, an intentional poke in the eye, to trot this person out and then for Senator Klobuchar to post the video. Because, if you're listening to the audio podcast and you didn't see the visual, let's just say that this woman does not appear to be starving. This woman is, and I'm not trying to be mean, but looks to be well over 300 pounds, probably pushing 400. And it's the height of absurdity for a U.S. senator to present this woman of all people as someone who urgently needs taxpayers to fund her grocery bill. She can, again, not try to be mean. It's just a fact. She could clearly afford major cutbacks to her food spending. And not only that, it would clearly be beneficial to her health. In fact, it's like the humane thing to do. When you have someone like this who's going to die because they're overeating so much and they're eating all the wrong things, to put them in a position where they have to think before they spend money on muffins and soda and candy and various slabs of meat and so on, it's actually good for them. And again, this is the most sympathetic witness that Democrats could find. It only gets worse from here. Illegal aliens, are some of the main recipients of food stamps, for example. Here's a recent admission from the administration of Maine Governor Janet Mills. And in case you can't make it out, Janet Mills acknowledges in this document that Maine provides SNAP benefits to non-citizens, including 5,000 non-citizens with EBT cards who don't have jobs, even though they're eligible to work. And EBT cards are very valuable online, as you may imagine, or very valuable in general, as you may imagine. We'll put a few receipts on the screen right now. Some states print your total EBT balance on the receipt, and as you can see, there are people with EBT balances of over $10,000 in some cases. It's clearly in excess of what any reasonable person would need for groceries. Watch.
I can tell you personally that when I worked at the grocery store and I cashed them out, the receipts were alarming. $13,000 on EBT food, not including the $29,000 that was on EBT cash. It's infuriating. Yes, sir.
So they're not getting 600.
And while they're dressed very well, how are you able to dress like that? Coming over here as running for help that we're supposedly helping them? How are you dressed like that when we, the American people, are scrapping for the next set of work boots? That's a problem. That's a serious problem.
It is indeed a serious problem, and it gets worse when you realize how many illegal aliens are taking advantage of the system. It's not just 5,000 people in Maine. This is from the Economic Policy Innovation Center. Quote, "The food stamp program provided benefits to 1.4 million non-citizens in fiscal year 2022. The latest data available from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Another 2.2 million children living with non-citizens were also on food stamps. California led the way in enrolling non-citizens on food stamps with 273,000 in fiscal year 2022. So there's a clear incentive here for illegal aliens to have children, not simply so that those children can be citizens, but also so that they can collect food stamps. That may be part of the reason why, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, quote, "Compared to households headed by the U.S.-born, immigrant-headed households have especially high use of food programs, 36% versus 25% for the U.S.-born. Additionally, quote, food stamp use by Afghan households increased the most from 19% to 35% between 2010 and 2019, while falling from 11% to 10% for native-born households. Yes, 35% of Afghan households were on food stamps. A typical family of four will receive around $800 in monthly assistance, which is more than many American families spend of their own money. This is not just wasteful spending. This is a direct attack on you and your family. You're being robbed at gunpoint by the state and forced to subsidize foreigners. We are inviting people to come to this country and live off of the labor of its citizens. Words cannot describe how evil this is. And by the way, for anyone who still draws comparisons between, well, the immigrants who come here is no different from, your ancestors who came here in the 1800s or the 1700s. No, see, this is the difference. Among others, this is one of the big differences, right? Because historically, the people who came to this country, the pioneers, they weren't coming here to get free food. It didn't work that way. They had to provide for themselves and their families and their communities. Now we have immigrants coming for free stuff that we have to pay for. We have to feed them. Now, I've long said that government shutdowns serve no purpose, that they inevitably get resolved with no meaningful interruption or changes to anyone's life. But this particular shutdown presents a clear opportunity for a different result. I mean, this time around, it's extremely easy to see how much overt waste and corruption is inherent in the SNAP system, largely because the people receiving these benefits, can't stop posting on TikTok, kind of bragging about how wasteful it is. They're revealing inadvertently that they don't actually need the money. They're telling us that they don't need the money in about a dozen different ways, by making threats, by highlighting the testimony of morbidly obese women, by admitting that they're handing the cash to illegal aliens, and so on. So let's listen to these people for once. Let's abolish the SNAP program altogether. Let's make this government shutdown the first shutdown in the history of this country that's actually been productive. Nobody's going to starve as a result. But a few million people, against their will, might have to learn the all-important twin concepts of budgeting and dieting. And if that happens, which it will if SNAP is abolished, we will all be much better off as a result. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. I'm excited to see some of these teams match up this year, and love how Prize Picks has all of their player projections, so I can watch the games, keep track of how well the players do versus how much they suck. Plus, I have a shot to win money, and who doesn't love winning money? I think everyone does. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy app that makes football even more exciting by letting you create lineups in less than a minute. Just choose more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in the game. This season brings something brand new, Stacks, the only feature that lets you select the same player up to 3 times in one lineup. So if you're confident in a quarterback's passing, rushing, and touchdowns, you can put all those projections together with options like Flex Play for added wiggle room or Power Play for bigger potential payouts, plus features like injury reboots that protect your lineup if a player leaves early. Prize Picks puts you in control. Available in over 40 states with fast and secure deposits through Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app for a reason. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Walsh to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Walsh to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So yesterday we talked about Zohran Mamdani, who claimed that his aunt was the real victim of 9/11. Nobody suffered on 9/11 like Zohran Mamdani's aunt did, because she felt weird wearing a hijab on the train after 9/11. Nothing happened to her, to be clear. She was not the victim of any kind of attack. Nobody even said anything to her, apparently. She just felt weird wearing the scarf after 9/11. And that was a tragedy. That was a tragedy so great that 25 years later, Zohran Mamdani couldn't even talk about it without crying. Well, there's one problem with this story that we alluded to yesterday, and that is that, aside from, well, there's a lot of problems, but one of them is that this aunt doesn't appear to actually exist. Bit of a minor detail. Only minor if you're a pathological liar. So Mamdani was asked about this yesterday, and here's what he said.
In a recent
address about Islamophobia. You referenced your aunt and some of the harassment she was facing post 9/11. Is that a blood relative?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was speaking about my aunt. I was speaking about Zehra Fouy, my father's cousin, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And for the takeaway from my more than 10-minute address about Islamophobia in this race and in this city to be the question of my aunt tells you everything about Andrew Cuomo.
Okay, so this aunt was his father's cousin, which means that his aunt is not really his aunt, but that would be his second cousin or his first cousin once removed or whatever. Not exactly sure. Definitely not his aunt. So he lied. And this is not a pedantic thing, by the way. This is not like some kind of technicality. The lie actually does matter because it was a calculated lie is what I'm saying. It was a calculated lie. Because let's pretend, the whole point of him bringing it up was he was trying to say that Islamophobia is this terrible thing. It's a real problem. Well, let's pretend that the story is true. Aside from him lying about the relationship, let's pretend that everything else is true. Well, imagine how different it sounds if he had been honest and said, Islamophobia is real. My father's cousin was nervous about wearing a hijab. That doesn't sound nearly as compelling, does it? The original story didn't sound compelling either, but the point is that your father's cousin, right? If you're trying to, use some sort of anecdotal argument to prove that something is if you want to use an anecdote to try to indicate that there's some kind of major systemic problem going on, well, already that's a problem because an anecdote would not prove anything. But if the anecdote is your father's cousin, then it actually proves the opposite point, right? That's, the nearest that is quote unquote Islamophobia has ever hit home for you is when your distant relation, your father's cousin, didn't want to wear a hijab, which again makes the opposite point of the one that Mamdani is trying to make, which is why he lied. It was entirely calculated. And everything this guy says is, of course, entirely calculated. Which is why I also don't. There have been some conservatives who I've seen here and there, like on X, who have wanted to give Mamdani some credit to some extent, even if they're not agreeing with him on the issues. They want to give him credit. Give him credit for having a populist economic message and all this kind of stuff. I don't give him credit for anything. This is an evil guy. He's a liar. He's a fraud. He's a phony. And I don't even give him credit because I keep hearing, again, even from some people on the right, that, well, he's so charismatic and likable. What? What are you talking? I'm not trying to be contrarian. Far be it from me to ever be contrarian. But it's really not what I'm doing here. Like, if someone's on the left and they're charismatic, I'll admit that they're charismatic because you could be charismatic and still evil. We all know that. But in this case, I don't see it. What do you mean what's special about this guy? We know he's a communist, so all of his positions are communist positions. They're not populist positions, they're communist positions. But what's the part? I've seen at this point a lot of clips of this guy, unfortunately, and we've talked about it on the show and done a fair amount of research into him. And I've just been waiting for that clip where I would see it and go, wow, this guy's got a lot of charisma. Oh, this is a really talented politician. Instead, it's just it's pretty standard boilerplate stuff for a politician. I just don't see it. I don't know what everyone's talking about. Now, then again, they said that about Obama, and I felt the same way. I hear Obama speak, and I'm like, what's everyone talking about? This guy is some sort of one of the great orators of our generation. Really? I don't see it. I don't know what you're talking about. And I certainly don't see it with this guy. Not that it matters anyway. Charismatic or not, he's an evil guy and he's going to destroy whatever is left of New York. Speaking of liars, by the way, this was funny. Last week, I responded to the failed MSNBC personality, Mehdi Hasan, who we can all agree is certainly somebody without charisma. And he was trying to explain, it all started because he was trying to explain, he was giving some kind of, I don't even know, he was talking to somebody who asked him a question on camera. But he was trying to explain why the Muslim call to prayer blasting out at 5 a.m. in an American town is just as legitimate as church bells in America. And then he went on to say that he is just as American as anybody else, even though he's a Muslim Indian who came here from the UK 10 years ago to work for Al Jazeera. Okay, he came here in his mid-30s to work in media. Well, Mehdi didn't, so I talked about the show, I responded to it, and Mehdi really didn't like my response that much. He was pretty offended by it. It's clear that he was especially offended when I pointed out that his show got low ratings. That in particular really got to him. So he's been tweeting at me for days now. I mean, for days, he has been posting frantically. And he did a video response, which was really quite low effort and low energy. And he's also just been tweeting it multiple times a day, every day. And it finally culminated last night in the inevitable, right? I mean, this is a guy who there's just nothing going on. He's like a totally empty person. There's nothing. I think if you were to peer inside his mind, and you might argue it's probably a pretty dark place, but I think it's dark in the sense like there's just nothing happening inside his mind at all. Just a very, very stupid, unimpressive person who's failed in everything he's tried to do in life. So, but that also makes him predictable. So you know exactly what he's going to do. So this is what it culminated in. He tagged Ben Shapiro in a post to try to get me fired. And the basis for this was that I retweeted a bar graph about EBT from some random account that had a bar graph that I thought was interesting. And so I retweeted the bar graph. And apparently, according to Mehdi, this guy posted this, whoever this random account is, posted something offensive a year ago or whatever. I don't know. The lamest possible pretense. So he tweeted this. Hey, Ben Shapiro, I know you're super tagging Ben. I know you're super anti-Semitism or super anti-Semitism. So just letting you know, an employee of yours, Matt Walsh, is sharing graphs from a card-carrying, far-right, Nazi-sounding anti-Semite. So we've reached the tattletale portion of Mehdi's public meltdown. We've reached the part where he's running to the principal. I'm telling, Mom, Matt's being mean. That's what we've got to. And the funny thing is that, first of all, I'm not getting fired. Second, what does he think it would accomplish if I did get fired? Would I just retire from public life? And like, it's not going to happen, but would I retire from public life and never say another word again? Is that what he's hoping for? Is that the plan? Well, that's not how it works anymore. And this is the problem for these people, is that they only have two modes, right? Only two modes. And they have not developed a third mode. It's only two. And the first mode, so when you challenge them, and when you got to keep in mind, Mehdi Hasan's the kind of guy he's not put himself in positions in life where he would be challenged. And he's always, he's at MSNBC. He was at Al Jazeera. He's like stayed very firmly in these bubbles where nobody would ever challenge him. Also, nobody's watching him. Nobody cares. No one's listening to what he says. So he doesn't get challenged. And now, for the first time, he's getting challenged a little bit, and he can't take it. So he goes back to the only two modes. And the first mode is to call you a bigot, blah, blah. You're a racist, whatever. Tried that. Surprisingly, not effective. Yelling the word racist at me for the 10 billionth time, shockingly, has no effect. Like, you can say it. There's no reason. You may as well just be shouting gibberish. The word doesn't mean anything to me. And all that accomplished was encouraging thousands of people to laugh at him and mock him, which they were doing. So now he's moved on to step number 2, which is the only other thing, which is, okay, that didn't work. Let's try to get him fired. So this is the problem that the left has. They only have these two strategies, these two moves, and both of them are totally ineffectual now. They've been rendered completely impotent, and they don't know what to do about it. And it's pathetic to watch. It's also kind of funny, but it's pathetic. Especially in Mehdi's case. I think it's really, really sad. This guy got fired from his job at MSNBC because his show was pulling in 37,000 viewers in the key demographic. 37,000, which is almost impossibly bad. Do you understand? I mean, keep in mind, cable news, a certain level of viewership is baked in. You automatically get. It's like when you sign your name on the SAT or whatever, and you automatically get points just for signing your name. So, you know, when you count for dentist office waiting rooms and airport terminals, that kind of thing. So a certain amount of it is baked in. Taking those out, was any human in the entire country actually choosing to tune in to Mehdi Hasan's show? It's doubtful. I mean, maybe he had some family members. Maybe Mamdani's dad's cousin was watching. I don't know. So very low numbers. But then he gets fired. He tries to become a podcaster. Nobody cares. Nobody's listening. He's making no cultural impact whatsoever. I mean, you could go up, poll 1,000 people. Random people, doesn't matter. You know, poll 1,000 people. Ask them, who's your favorite podcaster? Who's your favorite commentator? Who's someone who's really making an impact on you? 0 of the 1,000 would say, well, you know, Mehdi Hasan. That's my guy. 0 of the 1,000 would say that. And so now it's gotten so bad that he's actually been, like this week, he's been tweeting, bragging about how many views he got on his rebuttal to my video, even though all of his views are people who clicked on the video so they could leave a comment making fun of him. So all the comments are just crapping all over him. The guy had one viral video in his life, and it was the one where he was talking about me. And 98% of the views are people hate watching, and he's so happy about it. He's so happy. For the first time, he's been kind of plugging away in the media business for decades, really, and no one has ever cared or paid attention or watched at all. And for the first time, people are watching, and even though they're watching just so they can leave a comment and make fun of him, it's still like he's so kind of happy to have been noticed. And I just, I actually feel bad. Well, I would almost feel bad for him if he wasn't such an anti-American, anti-Christian, detestable, soulless, parasitic, grifting scumbag liar. If it weren't for that, I would actually feel bad for him. Speaking of other people that are kind of pathetic, Karine Jean-Pierre has been on her book tour, and I think it's a book tour. I think she has a book out or something. But yesterday she appeared on MSNBC where she again made her case for why people should pay attention to her. And her case is that she's a queer black woman. And she has found a way, because I've seen a few clips now of her on this book tour. Every single interview, she finds a way to wedge that in. And it's always in response to a question that has nothing to do with it. It's always like, oh, Karine, great to see you. What did you eat for breakfast this morning? Well, you know, as a queer black woman, I ate waffles. As a queer black woman, I decided I need to order some waffles. So she's been doing this her whole career. So I thought it'd be fun. I had my team go back and just kind of make a montage of every time. Well, not even every time, like not close to every time, but some of the times when Karine Jean-Pierre has bragged about being a queer black woman. Let's watch.
I woke up every day as a Black woman who is queer.
And as the first openly queer person to hold the position of press secretary for the President of the United States, I see every day how important visibility and representation are. I am a Black gay immigrant woman. As the first Black openly queer White House press secretary.
As a Black woman, as a person who's also LGBTQ.
As a Black woman who has walked through the walls of the White House.
That I meant a lot to people. Because of the communities that I represented. And they felt seen when they saw me at the podium, whether it was women of color, Black women, queer community, LGBTQ community, immigrant. They felt seen. I am a Black woman. I'm a queer woman. I'm an immigrant.
I'm Black. I'm a Black woman. I'm queer. I'm an immigrant. And I'm Haitian American.
You know, I could be wrong. And listen, I'm no Karine Jean-Pierre biographer by any means, but it seems like maybe she's a queer Black woman. I'm picking up on subtle hints. She drops these little hints every once in a while. These little little breadcrumbs she drops. These little breadcrumbs, these little queer breadcrumbs, and you follow the breadcrumbs through the forest. Very careful. You need like a magnifying glass to follow the breadcrumbs through the forest, and then you get to it's a queer black woman. It leads all the way to a queer black woman in the forest. It's imperceptible. I mean, it really is. It's very faint. It's very imperceptible. So I think, now look, I've been doing this for a long time in the media business. So there's some media savvy you need to look at that clip and read between the lines. And you can kind of tell that what she wants to highlight is that she's a queer black woman. So I know you need me to interpret that for you. So I just want to let you know. Anyway, speaking of, things that don't work anymore. I mean, she's Karine Jean-Pierre was living her best life in the year 2020, in the year of Floyd, right? There was about 6.5 minutes of time when just saying that may have been enough in some audiences to like win an argument. And she is clinging on to it. And the whole culture has moved way beyond this. Right? No one should have ever cared. Like being able to say, I'm a queer black woman, that should not have ever won an argument. I mean, never actually did win an argument, but it should never have, it should not have, there should not have been any social credit that you gain from saying that. But you did for a time, and now everyone's moved on. And so everyone hears that and says the same thing, which is, okay. And queer black woman. Queer black woman, the Karine Jean-Pierre story. That should be her. The only surprising thing is that is not the title of her book. I don't think it is. Maybe it is. What's her book called? Does she put that in the title? No, she doesn't. Okay. A Look Inside a Broken White House is the name of the book. Independent. A Look Inside a Broken White. I never even looked up the book. So that's A Look Inside a Broken White House. Like the White House that she was a part of, that she was helping to run. So I'm shocked that the title of the book is not Queer Black Woman, the story of Karine Jean-Pierre, a queer black woman. Written by queer black woman, Karine Jean-Pierre, who's a queer black woman. I'm shocked that is not the title of the book. What started as an idea is now the podcast and business blasting through your earbuds. Launching your own business is pretty much on everyone's bucket list, but most people let it collect dust right next to learn a language and get abs. Stop hiding behind lame excuses like, I don't have the skills, I can't do it alone. Turn those what ifs into bold why nots with Shopify backing your ideas. They've got the tools, you just need to take the chance. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. We even use it for our own Daily Wire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so you can all get the goods. You might be asking, what if I can't design a website or I'm worried people haven't heard of my brand? Well, not a problem. Shopify's got you covered from the start. Beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. And if you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial. Start selling today at shopify.com/Walsh. Go to shopify.com/Walsh, shopify.com/Walsh. Today marks 1 year since Am I Racist premiered on Daily Wire Plus. 1 year later, remains the #1 documentary of the decade and the most watched release in Daily Wire history. If you haven't seen it yet, well, now's your chance, but you got to be a Daily Wire Plus member. You can join right now for as little as $7 a month with our appropriately named Deal of the Decade. As a member, you get full access to Am I Racist, including all bonus footage and behind-the-scenes content. You also unlock our entire library of documentaries, movies, and original series, along with this show, ad-free, uncensored, and 1 hour before anyone else. Join now at dailywire.com. You do a show like this long enough, and inevitably there are stories that end up resurfacing over the years. And yeah, occasionally there's a reason to revisit some of my old monologues, if you can believe it. And when this happens, it's never a good thing. In fact, it's usually because some horrible disaster has occurred. And we spent several shows talking about the imminent risk of a mid-air collision at low altitude, for example. And then after that military helicopter crashed into an American Airlines jet, all of a sudden, those old shows became relevant again. And today is yet another one of these moments. We have to revisit an old episode because a horrible tragedy, one that was extremely painfully preventable, has occurred. So I'm going to play a short excerpt from my opening monologue back in September of 2023. Here's the background. I was talking about the killing of a 17-year-old white high school student in Akron, Ohio, named Ethan Lyman. In the summer of 2022, Lyman and his friends decided to harass random people with a toy gun that shot water pellets. In particular, Lyman and his friends shot water pellets at 3 black men between the ages of 19 and 21 who were playing basketball, including a man named Deshaun Stafford. And initially, the 3 men thought they were under attack, started to run away. But eventually, the 3 men, apparently realizing that there was no actual imminent threat threat to them, ran back towards Lyman. And once they caught up to him, Deshaun Stafford brutally beat and stomped Ethan Lyman to death. This was not a case of self-defense. Okay, at this point, they were well past the point where they knew this was not a real gun; it was water. And they're stomping on him, and it's a pretty good indication if you're stomping on someone on the ground, that means it's not self-defense, because that means they're on the ground. Lyman was found with blood coming out of his ears and nose. There was a shoe print on his chest. And on top of that, Stafford and his friends stole Lyman's car and fled the scene after Lyman was dead. Now, prosecutors initially brought murder charges, but they later decided to reduce the charges to involuntary manslaughter and assault after one of the prosecutors said that Lyman had died in a case of, quote, hood justice, meaning Ethan Lyman had it coming. So notice what's happening here. 3 black men brutally executed a white 17-year-old, not because of self-defense, but just because they were mad at him. They were just mad. They wanted to make a point. And there were obvious reasons to suspect that the race of the victim contributed to the brutality of the killing. But instead of talking about that, prosecutors used race to absolve the killers of responsibility. Oh, they were just dispensing hood justice. Clear implication is that the white kid had it coming, because this is how justice works in black neighborhoods like this, apparently. Then at trial, the jury, again presumably for racial reasons, failed to convict Deshaun Stafford on involuntary manslaughter. And in the end, he was only convicted for assault. And here's what I said at the time for context. This week, Ethan Lyman's killers got off with a conviction for assault. That's it. They were acquitted of involuntary manslaughter. It's as if they just got into a nasty bar fight or something. They stomped somebody to death, and all they're getting is an assault charge. Conviction, rather. So they'll almost certainly be out of jail within 2 years, if not sooner. This is jury nullification encouraged by prosecutors. There's no other term that you can use to describe this. Now, I referred to this verdict as jury nullification, but actually it was worse than that. The prosecutors decided not to retry any of the other defendants on the involuntary manslaughter charge, even though they could have done so. So the prosecutors effectively endorsed the jury's decision to convict Deshaun Stafford and his co-defendants for assault. As I predicted at the time, Stafford ended up spending less than 2 years in prison. Specifically, he spent the 6 months of his sentence in a halfway house and was fully released in December of 2024. But his freedom didn't last long. This summer, he was arrested once again. And shortly afterwards, he had another criminal conviction on his record. This is from a report in Yahoo News from the beginning of this month. Quote, 2 brothers who were convicted of assault charges in the beating death of an Akron teen in the I Promise school parking lot has been convicted of new felony charges. Deshaun Stafford was sentenced to probation this week for a drug charge. Stafford, 23, was at a party on June 29th when he was approached by an officer while dancing in the street. The officer found cocaine in his pocket. Judge Mary Margaret Rowlands placed Deshaun on probation for 6 months on October 1st. Now, this is the judge in question, for what it's worth. And for our audio podcast listeners, she's exactly what you would expect her to look like. Which is to say she's a woman, because in so many of these cases, as we've seen, it just so happens, coincidentally, and in so many cases where they let these violent thugs out, These are female judges. Not always, but so often. She gave Deshaun Stafford probation with no prison time after he was caught with cocaine immediately after getting out of prison for killing someone. Now, make no mistake about it, the judge knew exactly what she was doing. She knows that people who commit a crime, any crime, are dramatically more likely than the general population to commit violent crimes in the future. With each crime they commit, that likelihood increases exponentially. That's especially true when you're talking about serious crimes like violent assault and cocaine possession. If we went back to 3-strike laws, something like 50% of all violent crime would vanish overnight. So the only reason not to throw the book at somebody like Deshaun Stafford is because you want him to commit more crime and destroy even more lives. And indeed, in a matter of weeks, that's exactly what Deshaun Stafford did. He killed yet another young white victim. Watch.
A man who served time in connection to the death of an Akron high school student has now been charged for his connection to shooting and killing an innocent bystander. Deshaun Stafford is facing several charges, including murder in the deadly shooting of Timothy Hutchinson. Police say Hutchinson was caught in the crossfire earlier this month in Highland Square. Investigators believe Stafford shot at a man who then fired back, hitting Hutchinson. The other suspect has been arrested, facing separate charges. Stafford was released earlier this year after serving time for an assault charge in the death of 17-year-old Ethan Liming back in 2022. Liming died from a head injury during a fight with Stafford and his brother after Liming and his friend shot gel pellets at them while they were playing basketball outside the I Promise school in Akron. News 5's Bob Jones spoke with Hutchinson's father earlier this month. He told us his son loved to fish and camp, and he had graduated from the University of Akron just last spring with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he was working in Worcester.
So this is essentially a felony murder charge, as best I could tell. Deshaun Stafford started shooting at someone, and in self-defense, that person shot back and accidentally hit 25-year-old Timothy Hutchinson, who was an innocent bystander. But because he started the shootout, Stafford is being charged for Hutchinson's murder because he is 100% responsible. He is the murderer here. Now, in an ideal society, that would be the end of the story. But we obviously don't live in an ideal society, so we have to ask, will that charge stick? Will a jury nullify those charges as well? And if not, what kind of sentence do you think the liberal female judge will hand down? What's your best guess? 5 years, 10? After killing his second person, how many? Now, personally, I predict 8 years or so at most. When Deshaun Stafford finally kills someone that the system cares about, meaning not a white guy, that's when he'll face serious lifelong consequences and not a moment sooner. That's because, as it's currently set up, our justice system, this is the way it works. Our justice system will basically spot you one murder, as long as you're in the right demographic. If you're in the right demographic and you are an official codified victim, according to the way the system works, which is to say you're anything but a white guy, then they'll give you one. Like, you can kill one person with no significant penalty. After you kill your second, and it's guaranteed you will, then they'll think about maybe putting you away for a decade or two. This is literally how the system works, and it's total madness. Every other day we hear about people getting killed because the government, in the name of equity, decided not to enforce the law. Remember this crash from last week? You can see it on the screen. A 21-year-old illegal migrant from India drove an 18-wheeler in to stop traffic on the freeway in California, didn't even attempt to hit the brakes, killed 3 people, seriously injured several others. The driver, Preet Singh, entered this country illegally in 2022, but instead of deporting him, the Biden administration let him stay. Now several people are dead, including 76-year-old Clarence Nelson and 69-year-old Lisa Nelson. Now, Singh has been charged with vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and driving under the influence, and those sound like serious charges, but as an illegal alien, Singh is obviously entitled to preferential treatment, which with how things work now. So with that in mind, how long until a California judge lets him loose? Without informing ICE, of course. How long until Singh is driving his 18-wheeler again? How long until he slaughters more victims? 5 years? Less? At a certain point, we have to decide how long we're going to allow our communities to be held hostage by these barbarians. No one should get a mulligan after killing another human being or invading our country or committing any other serious crime. You know, when I did a show on Ethan Liming back in 2023, I received more than a few comments about how Ethan Liming was in the wrong and had it coming for shooting the toy gun at those 3 black men. And these people criticized me for assuming the worst about Deshaun Stafford. Well, you know, guess what? Sometimes assuming the worst is the right approach. Sometimes it saves the lives of innocent people. And the possibility of saving an innocent person is infinitely more important than showing kindness to criminals or giving them the benefit of the doubt or giving them a second chance. The deaths of Timothy Hutchinson, Clarence Nelson, and Lisa Nelson were horrible, yes, but they were also extremely predictable and preventable. And it's time we start preventing them. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Hey there, I'm Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley.
And I'm Georgia Howe, and we're the hosts of Morning Wire.
We bring you all the news you need to know in 15 minutes or less.
Watch and listen to Morning Wire 7 days a week, everywhere you get your podcasts.